Welcome back to No Skinny Cooks. Today we're going to learn how to make one of my own recipes, something that I call chocolate cherry bombs. This is loosely based on a recipe I found on King Arthur's website, but the main ingredients and the flavors are really completely different. I've made these quite a few times, and everyone that's had them has liked them. Now, spoiler alert here, if you don't like chocolate or cherries, this is not for you. However, the good thing is that this recipe is really versatile, and you can replace the cherries and flavoring with almost anything. I've done what I like to call candy bar flavors with this one. You can use peanut butter chips, toffee chips, peanuts and raisins, almonds and coconut. The list is almost endless. I may make more videos of some of the other variations. You can let me know in the comments if there's a particular candy bar that you'd like to try to emulate, even one I may not have mentioned before. So let's get started and take a look at the software that we're going to need to build these cookies. So this one has quite a few ingredients. First, you're going to need about a cup, 215 grams of brown sugar. You'll need 1 3/4 cups, or about 200 grams of all-purpose flour. I usually use King Arthur. And you can get a little creative with the chocolate. You need 1 cup of chocolate chips. I usually use half a cup of milk chocolate, half a cup of dark chocolate. But if you prefer all milk or all dark, that's perfectly fine. You'll need 1.5 cups of dried cherries. And here comes some more chocolate. You'll need 2/3 cup, or 60 grams of cocoa. I prefer dark cocoa, but Dutch process, use whatever you like. You're going to have to put in 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of black cherry extract. Now, you need to be really careful with this. I found that some of these extracts taste more like cough medicine than cherries. One that I found works really well is the Loran Oil Super Strength Black Cherry flavoring. It's potent though, so I only use 1/4 teaspoon. And even with that little bitty amount, the cookie dough is going to really smell like cherries. Now, if you have a different maker of extract, you may need to experiment. Just put in a little bit at a time, really until you can start to smell the aroma of cherries. Next, 2 teaspoons of vanilla. You can use extract, but I prefer vanilla bean paste. I think it's a bit more flavorful. You're going to put in 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of espresso powder. Espresso powder will bring out the chocolate flavor. Now, if you want it to be more of a mocha chocolate flavor, increase this to 1 teaspoon. I don't think coffee goes too well with cherries though, so I'm going to stick with 1/4 teaspoon for this bake. 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 large eggs, hopefully at room temperature, and then unsalted butter, about 8 tablespoons or a whole stick. You're going to need to melt this in the microwave first. Now, something you can think about is you could reduce the dried cherries by maybe 1/2 cup and add in 1/2 cup of slivered toasted almonds. As I said, this recipe is pretty versatile. I'll place links below for some of the more unusual ingredients I'm using here. So let's look at the hardware you're going to need to bake these cookies. First, you're going to need a good mixer with a whisk and blade attachments. I'm going to be using my Nutrimil Artiste because this is a pretty heavy dough and it's going to really give your mixer a workout. You're going to need cookie sheets with some sort of lining, parchment paper or silicone, a whisk, a baking spatula, a cookie scoop. I'm using a medium, that's about 1.5 tablespoons. You can use smaller if you'd like to have more servings. You'll need a mixing bowl, a sifter, a scale, preferably. It's always better to measure by weight than by volume, and a cooling rack. Now, before we put these cherry bombs together, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments if you subscribed and if you'd like to see me make something special, or if you gave these a try and what you think of them. Let's get started. So before we start messing around with the ingredients, the first thing you want to do is put the rack in the middle position of your oven and preheat it to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 180 degrees Celsius. So let's prepare the dry ingredients first. Start by sifting the 200 grams of flour. Well, this was pretty strange. I've never had this happen before. While I was sifting the flour, I noticed a little thing in the flour. It appears to be a stalk or a part of the seed pod from the wheat. Really interesting, and I'm glad I sifted it. Next, we need to add in the 60 grams of sifted cocoa powder. Now, I've already sifted this, so I'm just going to add it to the flour and give it a good stir with my whisk. Once I've done that, I'll add the remaining dry ingredients, the baking powder, the salt, and the espresso powder. Take these and whisk them together, and then just set this aside while we start on the wet ingredients. So now let's work on the wet ingredients. Make sure you put the whisk attachment onto your mixer first. We're going to start by adding the melted stick of butter into the mixing bowl, followed by the 215 grams of brown sugar. Once you've done that, turn your mixer on to maybe a medium setting and start creaming the sugar and butter together. Now, I don't usually use my Nutrimil for anything other than bread, so I forgot to add the bowl scrapers here, so that's what you see me putting on. Once the butter and sugar are well mixed, now you're going to take your eggs and drop them into the mixture one at a time, letting each incorporate. Finally, let's add the 2 teaspoons of vanilla paste, or extract if you prefer. And this is where you're going to also add in the black cherry flavoring. As I mentioned before, you need to be very careful with this, only use barely enough. This stuff is really potent, and too much of it could overwhelm the balm and make it taste medicinal. Once all the wet ingredients are well mixed, switch from the whisk over to the blade attachment on your mixer. So now we're going to add in the dry ingredients. You're going to add in your flour and cocoa mixture into the bowl, turn it on to low and then medium, Now, I got a bit of dust here. The Nutri-Mill does have a very nice cover, but the problem is I put the cover on, you wouldn't be able to see what was happening, so I'll deal with the dust. Run the mixture until everything comes together into a nice chocolatey looking batter. And now we're going to add in some hard stuff. By that I mean like the chocolate chips. Now, depending on what type of mixture you have, you may want to do this by hand. I know that the artisan can take it, so I slowly will add in my dark and milk chocolate chips. Once they've been mixed in, then I'll slowly add in the dried cherries and then run the mixture until the cookie dough more or less comes together. Now you're going to use your cookie scoop to scoop out a full scoop. Sometimes I drop it into my hand and roll it into a little ball and then sort of squash it down so it's like a little thick pancake. But honestly, I kind of like the rough, rustic look, so I'm just going to scoop them onto the cookie sheet. These really won't spread out much in the oven, so you can get 20 or so on a standard cookie sheet. Now these are going to go into a 350 degree or 180 degree Celsius oven for 10 to 15 minutes, or 8 to 10 minutes if you went with a smaller scoop. I find that in my oven about 13 minutes seems to do the trick. Using the medium 1.5 tablespoon scoop, you'll get around 3 dozen. With a smaller scoop, you might get about 5. Once they're done, put them on a cooling rack for at least 15 minutes to let the chocolate cool a little bit and to firm up. Then have a couple. Let me know what you think. I think these are even better after they've chilled for a bit in the fridge. And now there you have it. These are my chocolate cherry bombs. Check out the links below for how to find some of the software and hardware I use to make them. As always, comment if you give the recipe a try, and please be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notify bell to see when I add more content. I hope you've enjoyed our journey today. Enjoy them.